All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today's deep dive takes us into some pretty murky waters. And trust me, the waters get pretty deep. We're looking into Chris Butler and his Science of Identity Foundation.
And you weren't kidding about those sources. Court documents, forum posts, investigative reports. We've even got some of Butler's own writings. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? Trying to piece together the puzzle. Who is Chris Butler, and why do those cult accusations keep popping up?
It's a puzzle, all right. And it all starts with Butler himself. His story's a wild ride, that's for sure.
That's an understatement, Terry.
Talk about a winding path. It's like he was searching for something, trying on different identities until, boom, lands in the world of Hare Krishna.
And it's that Hare Krishna connection, specifically ISKCon, that really kicks things into high gear and starts his own group right here in Hawaii.
Yeah, and that's where the controversy really starts brewing. You see, Butler wasn't just any Hare Krishna devotee. He declared himself a Jagat Guru.
Hold on, Jagat Guru, that's a pretty loaded title, isn't it?
Oh yeah, think world teacher, implying a level of spiritual authority that even raised eyebrows within ISKCon, the very group he was part of.
So he's claiming this super high spiritual status while simultaneously saying, see y'all later, to the very tradition he's supposedly mastering. That's some serious cognitive dissonance right there.
It's definitely a head-scratcher. And then there's the whole sannyasa situation.
Okay, now I'm lost. Sannyasa. Break it down for me. I'm not exactly a Hindu scholar over here.
Fair enough. So sannyasa in Hinduism is a stage of life where a person renounces worldly possessions and desires, basically dedicating their life to spiritual liberation. We're talking vows of celibacy, poverty, and obedience to the guru. This is a highly respected path.
Got it. So Butler, who's claiming to be this enlightened guru, decides to ditch the very path associated with that spiritual authority.
You got it. And to add another layer of to this whole thing, he gets married. Remember, sannyasa usually involves a vow of celibacy.
Whoa, hold up. This is getting more and more contradictory. He's this world teacher, a renunciate on the path of spiritual liberation, and then he ties the knot. I bet that didn't go over well with his followers.
You can say that again, those forum posts from ex-followers, packed with stories of confusion and disillusionment. Some felt betrayed, like he'd pulled a bait and switch. Others tried to make sense of it, saying he was operating on some higher spiritual plane they couldn't comprehend.
It's mind-boggling how one decision can reveal so much about a person and their influence over others. And speaking of followers, let's dive into that dynamic. What was Butler's relationship like with his disciples in CEF?
That's where things get really interesting, or should I say murky. Current followers talk about his love and wisdom, but the accounts from ex-followers, well, they paint a very different picture. We're talking allegations of manipulation, control, even abuse.
Yikes. Manipulation and control. Those are serious accusations. Can you give us some concrete examples? What kind of control are we talking about here?
Well, many ex-followers describe a system where Butler had his hand in every aspect of their lives. Their careers, their relationships, their finances. They even say he dictated who they could be friends with.
Wow, no pressure there. It sounds like he was demanding a level of devotion that goes way beyond what you expect in a typical religious setting.
That's what a lot of former members claim. And to make things even more strange, some of the practices they describe are out there even by cult standards.
Okay, you've got my attention now. Spill the tea. Our listener wants to know the juicy details.
For example, there are allegations that some followers were told to, and I can't believe I'm saying this, consume Butler's toenail clippings and used foot water. They believed it was some kind of spiritual practice.
Hold on. Toenail clippings and foot water. That is definitely not your average Sunday service.
Yeah.
What does Butler have to say about these accusations? Does he address them at all?
He does, but in a roundabout way. He talks a lot about the importance of obeying the guru and the dangers of speaking ill of them, slander. Some of his teachings even suggest that bad things will happen to those who badmouth a true spiritual master.
So basically, he's shutting down dissent and creating an environment where people are terrified to speak out, even if they have genuine concerns. That's classic cult behavior 101.
It's definitely a tactic used by many groups that want to keep their members in line, and this fear of speaking out makes it that much harder to get a clear picture of what was really going on inside CEF.
It's unsettling to think about the level of control Butler might have had. But this whole CEF thing, it's not your typical Hare Krishna group, right? They're running businesses.
Totally. It's not what you picture when you think of Hare Krishna, monks begging, all that. CEF is a whole different ballgame. We're talking health food stores like down to earth, publishing, media, even animation. It's an empire.
It really is. like a corporation hiding in spiritual clothing. And they've been incredibly successful, too. Down to earth. Everyone in Hawaii knows it. Makes you wonder where all that money's going.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Plenty of journalists have tried to peek into CEF's finances, but they've hit a brick wall every time. CEF keeps their money matters under wraps, which, let's be honest, raises some red flags about transparency and, well, potential exploitation.
Adds the whole mysterious vibe around the group, doesn't it? But let's circle back to those ex-follower accounts for a sec. You mentioned a feeling of being watched, having to conform. What did that look like in practice?
It went deeper than just behavior. Butler was shaping how they thought, what they believed. There are stories of him literally dictating how they should react if someone criticized CEF or him, specific talking points.
So almost like thought control, molding their entire worldview.
That's the impression you get from these accounts. And it wasn't just talk. There were systems in place to enforce this control, serious group pressure, isolation from the outside world, and, as we mentioned earlier, the threat of those spiritual consequences if you disobeyed. It's like a recipe for a cult-like environment.
And with that kind of pressure, the weird stuff, the toenail clippings, it almost starts to make sense, even though it's still super disturbing.
Exactly. When you shut down critical thinking, when obeying the guru is all that matters, even the craziest ideas can become normal. It's a slow process, but it works, breaking down your sense of self and replacing it with the guru's ideology.
Like a slow drip of poison eventually taking over your whole system. But we have to acknowledge, not everyone who joins a group like this turns into a mindless follower, right?
Of course not. People join spiritual groups for all sorts of reasons. Community, meaning, guidance. It's important to remember that. But when you have all these stories about manipulation and control, especially from people who've left, well, it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Right. It's about seeing the patterns, the red flags, and not shying away from those tough questions. And speaking of tough questions, what happens when someone decides to leave CEF?
That's when it gets really tough. Leaving a group like this is a huge deal, emotionally and practically. You're not just leaving a group, you're leaving your whole belief system, your friends, your family, maybe even your family. It's starting over from scratch with the added baggage of what you went through.
Talk about an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Leaving everything you know behind, plus dealing with the emotional fallout of leaving such a controlling group.
Exactly. And to make things even harder, CEF doesn't exactly roll out the red carpet for people who leave. They emphasize loyalty to Butler, the idea that if you leave, you're lost, misguided.
So on top of everything else, they pile on guilt and shame for choosing a different path.
It's incredibly isolating. And there are even reports of ex-members being ostracized, harassed, having their reputations smeared.
Yeah.
It's like a punishment for leaving and speaking out.
Classic cult tactic. Make leaving so awful that people are terrified to even think about it.
It works. It keeps people stuck, even if the group isn't good for them, even if it's hurting them.
Really makes you realize how important it is to have a support system outside the group. People who can offer a different perspective.
Absolutely. That's where those online forums come in. They create a safe space for ex-members to connect, to share, to support each other. It's vital for healing.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, there's hope. People do leave these groups, rebuild their lives, find happiness outside the shadow of a controlling leader.
Their stories are amazing, not just for them, but for anyone questioning their involvement in a group like CEF. A glimpse of another reality, a life beyond the cult.
It all brings up some big questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we tell a genuine spiritual teacher from someone who's just using people?
That's a question that's been around forever. Charismatic leaders have always attracted followers, promising enlightenment, salvation, a better world. And history shows us how those promises can go wrong, sometimes with devastating results.
Look at groups like the Branch Davidians or Heaven's Gate. Tragedies fueled by blind faith in a leader demanding absolute obedience.
And while Chris Butler and CEF haven't gone that far, there are enough similarities, enough unsettling details to give us pause.
So how do we protect ourselves? How do we spot the warning signs of manipulation and avoid getting sucked in?
Well, there are some big red flags to watch out for. A leader who demands total obedience, isolates followers, controls information, uses fear and guilt, those are all danger signs.
It's also about knowing our own weaknesses. We all want to belong, to feel connected, to find meaning. Cults exploit those needs.
Exactly. They offer community, a set of beliefs, a leader who promises to guide you to a better life. It's tempting, especially if you're feeling lost.
So it comes down to critical thinking, questioning everything, and not being afraid to walk away if something feels wrong, no matter how attractive the message.
Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
It's heavy stuff, I know, but it's important to talk about.
Absolutely. These conversations are important, not just to understand stuff, but to understand how cults work and how to protect ourselves and the people we care about.
It's heavy stuff, no doubt.
Yeah.
But the more we know, the better we can protect ourselves.
Right. It's like a virus. It can spread anywhere. There's vulnerability and a lack of critical thinking.
Exactly. But let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about something a bit more positive. The people who have left CEF, their stories are pretty inspiring.
They really are. Leaving a group like that, it's a huge undertaking. You're not just changing your beliefs, you're rebuilding your whole life, your identity, your relationships.
It's like hitting the reset button on your whole world, while also dealing with the emotional fallout of leaving a controlling group, plus the potential for harassment. It takes guts.
It does. Walking away from everything you know, especially when you've been told that leaving means spiritual doom, that takes courage.
And yet, so many people do it. They leave and they find a way to heal, to reconnect with themselves and the world in a healthier way.
It shows you the strength of the human spirit, right?
Yeah.
The ability to overcome even the toughest challenges.
Totally. And it's important to highlight those stories. They're a reminder that there's hope, that there's life beyond the group.
Absolutely. They show that escape is possible, that healing is possible.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Butler's journey, CEF's beliefs, the experiences of followers, the political ties, the businesses, the controversy, the resilience. It's a lot to digest.
It is. I bet our listeners' head is spinning right now. So let's try to boil it down to the key takeaways.
Good idea. What are the big lessons we can learn from all this, from Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation?
Well, first, charisma and spirituality, they're powerful forces, and they can be used for good or bad. Butler, like a lot of charismatic leaders, inspired incredible devotion, but when that devotion meets a lack of critical thinking and unquestioning obedience, well, that's a recipe for trouble.
It's like handing over the keys to your mind and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And second, cults, manipulative groups, they don't always wear a giant sign. They can seem harmless, even helpful.
It's not always about robes and chants. It can be way more subtle than that.
Right. It's about recognizing those patterns of control, no matter what form they take. And third, and I think this is the most important, questioning is key.
Question everything. Don't just accept what you're told, even if it comes from someone you respect.
Exactly. Critical thinking is your best weapon against manipulation. Challenge authority. Examine the evidence. Consider different perspectives.
And sometimes, that questioning, it might lead you to some tough conclusions. You might realize that someone you trusted let you down, or that a group you were part of, well, it's not what you thought it was.
And yeah, that can be painful, but it's also incredibly freeing. It lets you break free, take back your mind, and make your own choices.
So if there's one thing our listener remembers from all of this, let it be this. Never be afraid to question. Think for yourself. Trust your gut.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And if any of this has raised questions for you, the listener, please reach out to someone you trust. A therapist, a friend, a family member. There are resources out there, people who can help you sort through all this.
You are not alone. So many people have been through similar experiences and have come out the other side.
And their stories, they remind us that even in the toughest times, there's always hope.
Well, that feels like a good place to wrap up our deep dive into Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation. What a journey.
It was. But remember, this is just the beginning. We encourage you to keep digging, do your own research, draw your own conclusions.
Because at the end of the day, the search for truth, it's a personal journey, and it's a journey worth taking. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and stay curious.